You have no idea what I have gone through to play this game. Star Wars Rebellion, also known as Star Wars Supremacy in the United Kingdom and Ireland, is a real-time strategy, grand strategy game developed by Coolhand Interactive and released in 1998. Much like my obsession with the old Star Wars flight simulator games, this is back in time when you must read the manual with the game to play it. You'll command troop movements, capital ships, special units, and the main cast from the original Star Wars saga across the galaxy as you take the mantle of the classic Star Wars conflict, Empire vs. Rebels. Star Wars Rebellion takes place immediately after Star Wars A New Hope, or for my fellow Star Wars nerds, the day after the Battle of Yavin. You do have some control over how the story will progress, but at some point, Luke will go to Dagobah, bounty hunters will go after Han Solo to try to cash in on that pesky bounty Jabba put on him, and if Luke Skywalker and Darth Vader encounter each other, Luke will make the dreadful discovery of who Vader truly is. The story is non-linear and some things can be completely avoided. Like in my game, playing as the Rebels, Han Solo was never captured, and Luke finished his training on Dagobah without interruption. We also stayed away from building anything major on Hoth, Bespin, Yavin, Endor, and Tatooine. Full disclaimer, this was my first time playing Star Wars Rebellion, and my first time playing a grand strategy game like this at all. The closest thing I can compare it to is playing a strategy game like Civilization. Only this game has its own unique feel. It's like playing a strategy game mixed with an RTS. You have two game modes, strategic and an optional skippable tactic mode. There's only two sides and you can play as either side. It's just different from any other strategy or RTS game I've ever played. I like challenges, and I like to try to figure stuff out on my own and on the fly. So when I first played Rebellion, I just installed and booted up the game and jumped right in. I received a briefing from the Imperial C-3PO, because being an avid TIE Fighter pilot, you should watch my TIE Fighter game review by the way. Anyway, being an avid TIE Fighter pilot, I had to support the good guys. After the briefing, I realized, this game is gonna be more complicated than I expected. I walked into this game completely ignorant. I thought I'd played most of the Star Wars games on Steam. Then I started to get notifications on the sidebar, stuff about ships moving, building constructions being finished. And then I got notifications about planets joining the Rebel Alliance, planets are rioting, and I'm over here trying to read the Imperial C-3PO droid's advice on stuff, and this is still happening. What's going on? It was in this moment I realized I can't figure out this game on my own. My choices were clear. Read or watch a guide someone made, or read the game manual. While playing Star Wars Rebellion, I felt like I was drawing parallels to my first time playing XCOM UFO Defense, another old game but released in 1994, where I didn't know what I was doing and I accidentally stuffed one of my dead soldiers into another soldier's inventory. Both the funniest and one of the most horrific things I've ever done in a video game. To understand how to play UFO Defense, I had to go watch some video guides online. And I've done this before with other difficult games too, but it hits differently when it's an older game. With old games, you didn't have the internet to consult. You didn't have YouTube videos to watch to figure out how to beat a boss. You had game manuals, and if you were lucky, you had printed Prima strategy guides. I don't know if you're aware of this, but you can sometimes find game manuals on Steam. If the game has it available, you can find it on the Steam store page for the game you're looking for under the small resources link on the side. I don't remember when I realized there were manuals located there. Definitely didn't know it when I first tried to play XCOM UFO Defense. And other times, the manual is a PDF in the game folder with the rest of the game files. And for Star Wars Rebellion, that's where the manual is located. It's in your Steam directory, Steam app directory, common directory, Star Wars Rebellion folder right under manual.pdf. Star Wars Rebellion actually has tutorials. That was my first gripe and what I thought I was going to complain about the most in this review. But the tutorials are located in the manual, of all places. Following a tutorial in a manual has gotta be a first for me. The tutorials are pretty good, and will provide you with enough experience to play the rest of the game for yourself. The tutorial doesn't assume you know anything about how computers and Star Wars Rebellion works. Specifically, the verbiage the manual uses to describe itself is, "This manual is designed to get you up and running with Star Wars Rebellion as quickly as possible. This manual assumes no prior strategic or tactical gameplay experience. Nor does it assume you are a Windows 95 expert." The emphasis in the tutorial is that your goal is to learn how to play the game, and if you encounter the enemy side while following the tutorial, to either reset the game or auto-complete the battle. It's wild being told by a book from the late 1990s that the game is going to be playing in real time while I read it. It's just not what I was expecting when I installed this game. You might know enough from watching this video to be able to go play Star Wars Rebellion yourself, but it wouldn't hurt to look over the manual in case I missed something, if you plan on giving Star Wars Rebellion a try. Oh, and let's just add a note right now. I'll try to edit the review in a way which illustrates what I'm talking about or what I'm explaining, but the main screen that you're seeing right now, that's like 80% of the gameplay, and that percentage only increases if you skip the space battles and let it auto-calculate the outcomes. So this might be a good video to let it play and do something else. Go make yourself a sandwich or clean your house or something. After reading through the Star Wars Rebellion manual's tutorials, I decided the game I had made the most progress on would be the one I would continue. And while I can't deny my love for TIE fighters and Star Destroyers, starting the game as the Rebels was more akin to my preference in strategy. Both factions have distinct pros, cons, and strategies. That makes playing as either faction exciting. I think you could learn with either faction, but the important thing is to just keep going with the game, both the wins and the losses. The Empire steamrolled over my fleet a number of times, and I felt like I had to restart building my fleet from the ground up. But eventually, the Rebels get starships which can go head-to-head with Star Destroyers. But anyway, let me tell you about how my first game went on Star Wars Rebellion. After assuming command after the Battle of Yavin, I evacuated everyone off Yavin and sent all of my diplomatic characters into the next system to win over the Sluis sector. I sent one diplomat to most of the planets in the Sluis sector, and even a few diplomats to the Outer Rim to win over maximum rebel favor, and left a few major characters on a safe planet to spam recruit heroes, so I could build up my personnel as quickly as possible and win over as many planets as possible early on. After getting my foothold on a few key planets and mobilizing my fleet better, my fleet was split between the Rebel base and the old Yavin base, I started to send transport ships and troops into the Outer Rim territories to claim uninhabited planets, then build and said construction sites to then build mines and refineries on those Outer Rim planets to increase my resources while I waged a full-on stalemate war with the Imperials in the Corellian sector, where I held only 2 planets for literal, real-life days. Suddenly, Luke Skywalker peaced out, and I saw he went to Dagobah. This was when protecting Han Solo was critical, and I knew the bounty hunters were gunning for him because the espionage and abduction attempts on Han's planet became frequent. So I swapped him to another planet in the sector, but eventually the bounty hunters did catch up with him, and when they did, he shot them all dead. As you probably know, that's not how it played out in the movie. Luke made his way back from training and assumed his place as the commander of my major fleet. Freaking Jedi, they think they can just go AWOL at a second's notice. Pfft. What if I had a major battle plan that involved Luke Skywalker and the guy just up and leaves? Anyway, I continued to take over the Outer Rim sector by sector. shuttling troops on to transport starships from the Sluice sector, which I had total control of by this time. I slowly turned the galactic map red. Regardless of which side you're playing as, red dots always mean they're under Rebel Alliance control, green means they're under Empire control. I continue to hold on to my 2 planets in the Corellian sector, Salonia and Talus. Those were key planets to my survival this close to Coruscant. I would lose leader characters to spying missions because I didn't provide enough support from Bothan's spies on those missions, and then I'd try to perform rescue missions to get my characters back. This gave me the experience I needed to eventually get familiar with the mechanics of sending characters on missions and how best to support them on missions. And around this time, I finally colonized the last of the Outer Rim planets. At this time, I had reached somewhere around the in-game day counter to somewhere between day 700 and 800. Right around the time I started building my first Mon Calamari cruiser. At last, I had reached the point, technologically, where I can go head-to-head with the Empire. I started several of my spaceports with constructing Mon Calamari cruisers ASAP. I remembered the punch they could deliver from all the flight simulators I'd played. Just 10 days before my first cruiser's completion, an Imperial Star Destroyer appeared in the same system as the cruiser I was building. I scrambled to split up my largest fleet in an attempt to intercept by jumping from the Corellian sector back to the Sluice sector. But it still took like 30 to 40 days of transit, and it was just the next system over. There's not much more nerve-wracking than watching an Imperial Star Destroyer jump from planet to planet, knocking out my 1 X-Wing scouts I left to protect the planet. But the impacts at least softened up the Star Destroyer's TIE Fighter squadrons, to the point where I planned to retaliate with my brand spankin' new Mon Calamari cruiser and a couple detachments of the local X-Wing population and a Corellian corvette which had jumped from one of the other Outer Rim systems. But the Imperial Star Destroyer just left, which also caused plenty of anxiety because where did it go? I think it went back to the Corellian sector because it was around this time I was dealt my most debilitating defeat. 2/3 of my whole fleet were docked above the planet Talus, when suddenly I came under attack from numerous Star Destroyers, an Interdictor-class Star Destroyer, and even more numerous TIE Defenders. We didn't stand a chance. We couldn't even flee because of the Interdictor. We lost them all. The hard-earned prisoners, several of my own people, everyone else was grounded, and now the Imperials had air superiority over the Corellian sector. I was deflated. You have no idea how disappointing that setback was. I was tempted to just give up. I didn't because I had nearly every planet under my control in the galaxy, except for the stronghold in the inner core. So I rebuilt new starships, and mobilized some of my starfighters from the outer rim of colonized planets back into the Corellian sector to support the remnants of my fleet returning from defending my Mon Calamari cruisers. But they were also returning with Mon Calamari cruisers. Not all was lost. Not yet. The fleet returned from the Sluice sector and docked above Talus. I sent out Bothan spies to suss out where the Imperial fleet was at, and when I found the time was right, there was no fleet over Trallis when we struck back and beat up the starfighters left to defend Trallis, and bombarded it until it was ripe for planetary assault, which was uneventful after the bombing had cleared out the ground troops. At last, a real win against the Empire. This was my first taste of victory. A shame my spies told me the steamrolling Imperial fleet was on its way to Trallis, and just a couple of days away from arrival. I felt good having a few Mon Calamari cruisers, but not good enough to go against that many Star Destroyers, troop transports, and TIE Defenders. So we ran. Yeah, I admit it. Okay, we can at least call it a tactical retreat. But I took everyone off the planet and moved the fleet to a safe planet where at least I could have planetary cannon support. But now I had a new problem. How can I take Trallis and then build a planetary shield on it fast enough to defend against the Empire's retaliation? The solution to this question was to slowly build several construction yards on Talis, so I could immediately build a planetary shield and send it to Trallis after I retook it. In the meantime, my spies told me the Imperials were building another Star Destroyer on Trallis. You've got to be kidding me. Didn't they already have enough? Many in-game days passed. I would try to keep my fleet moving so I wouldn't lose everything again, and simultaneously working on constructing these newfangled A and B wings. I also continued to build on Outer Rim worlds and increased my resources. At one point, the Empire snatched away one of my Outer Rim planets, and that just wouldn't do, so I utilized a special transport, built a payload of 3 Wookiee divisions, and sent along one of my generals to take that sucker back for the Alliance! I had no idea why the planet went from neutral to 100% Imperial. I even had Talon Card working on an ongoing diplomatic mission on that planet, and they just ninja'd it from me. Then the time had come. I had several construction yards on Talis, I had several Mon Calamari cruisers, and I found the skies above Trallis to be void of any fleets. I hit them again. There's a palpable excitement waiting for your fleet to finish the jump to hyperspace on top of your target planet. I can't describe it. It's exciting. It's scary because what if your intel wasn't complete? You don't know for certain if you're not gonna lose everything in this one move. We made it to Trallis, did the same dance in number, beat up the puny, lonely TIE Interceptor Squadron, bombed the AT-ATs on the surface, dropped our troops led by Skywalker for a planetary assault, but this time, after victory, we started construction on 2 planetary shields, one built from Trallis, the other from Talis. Then we waited for delivery. This is when Talis and Salonia were at their most vulnerable. I'd built up 2 level 2 shields on both planets and equipped them with planetary cannons. But if the Imperials were determined enough, they could sabotage and weaken the defenses before Trallis was sufficiently reinforced to be safe without a fleet over it, providing immediate support. Several nerve-wracking real-life hours later, I finally stabilized Trallis. I now had 3 planets in the Corellian sector. The impossible had just been made possible. Maybe, just maybe, I could win this war. Not long after the stabilization of Trallis, my Bothan spies discovered an incredible, tantalizing opportunity. My next-door neighbor planet didn't have a planetary shield or any planetary cannons. Even better, Darth Vader was on it with many, many troops. How could I pass up an opportunity to strike? I jumped my fleet above the planet and bombarded the planet until every ground troop was dead. I would have done the Imperials proud had I been playing as them, but we won't think about that right now. We still had the special forces on the ground to deal with. And I started the planetary assault. Things didn't turn out quite how I expected. Yes, I did win and capture several Imperial commanders, but not all of them. They had fought back valiantly, and unfortunately Vader got away while Luke Skywalker was injured and had made the discovery of who his father really is. Around this time, my diplomats had finished their work getting 100% support on the Outer Rim system I was working on, and had made it back to the Corellian sector, because I was going to need good negotiators to unbrainwash the people on these planets. Leia was added to Luke's company, and Luke passed on the information of their shared heritage to her, thereby unlocking her potential as Force-sensitive. While waiting for Luke Skywalker to recover from his injuries, the fleet jumped from different planets in the Corellian sector. And yet another new discovery was made. The Imperials had started removing planetary shields. I thought this could mean one of 2 things. Either the Imperials were losing resources and were forced to downsize to a more manageable size, or, what I thought more likely, This could mean the Imperials were constructing a brand new Death Star. The struggle was very real within the Corellian system, as the Empire seemed to move troops in and out of the system at random. The puzzle of the Empire scrapping the shield generators concerned me, but there wasn't any time to worry about it, as I snatched up the free planets nearby which had lost their shield generators, then sent my strongest negotiators to win the hearts and minds of the people who lived there. While this was going on, I was using Luke Skywalker to try to find Jedi prospects. I also experimented if using more people in the same diplomacy mission would increase the effects of mission success. Long story short, more missions equals better gains in popular support, instead of a larger team on the same mission. But while doing so, I discovered 2 traitors among us. Luke Skywalker sussed out Borsk Phalia and Ori Marco as traitors. This could have been why one of the Outer Rim planets I was negotiating with turned 100% Imperial. I think I had both Talon Card and Phalia working on that planet when it suddenly turned completely Imperial. And also explained why I had to keep saving Ori Marco from failed espionage missions. So what can we do with traitors? Unfortunately, not a whole lot. According to the Star Wars Rebellion manual I read, they'll probably throw in with the side who they think is winning. So it's kind of a use at your own risk kind of thing. You can also retire them, or you can do what I did, which was send them away to the farthest planet in the Outer Rim, away from the Empire. I expect they'll leak information to the Empire, but at least they won't do as much damage off on the other side of the galaxy. Along with the discovery of the traitors and their banishment, it was a slow campaign of taking one planet at a time, until one fateful day when Leia got herself captured. Now we need to plan a rescue among this long, arduous conquest. The bounty hunters weren't done with Han Solo either, as once again he successfully warded off another attempted abduction for Jabba. So I gotta move Han around more and can't leave him as the governor, aka the commander or general on a planet. Sadly, no missions to save Leia were ever successful. It wasn't until the time came to attack the planet that she was on that we freed her. I eventually realized that there were no more fleets in the system. We moved from planet to planet and waited until a sabotage mission was successful in removing the planetary shields. And at long last, on that fateful day, we not only took the final 2 planets in the system, but Luke Skywalker also successfully confronted Darth Vader twice and grew to the rank of Jedi Knight. Now I had a new personal side mission. Train a few new Jedi. Bad news for me though, one of the Jedi prospects was also a traitor, so obviously no training for Ori Marco, you filthy animal. With the Corellian system now under rebel control, the time came to turn our attention to Coruscant, and our open door to the system, with Chandrila as our forward operating base. While working on softening up the Corellian sector, we continued to build mines and refineries in the Outer Rim, and selected a few choice planets to host training facilities and shipyards. For some unknown reason, the Empire completely left Chandrila alone since the start of the game and only sabotaged stuff there and focused mainly on bullying one of the Outer Rim sectors with their fleets while I took the Corellian sector. Since the Empire was so kind as to leave Chandrila alone while waging war around Corellia, I built up Chandrila's construction facilities and planetary shields to slowly turn the world into a fortress to host the oncoming surge of ships and troops after the war was finished in the neighboring system. At last, the time had come. All technological advances had been made, Leia had been saved, the Corellian system was under rebel control, the support had been won on nearly all planets. The time had come. The final act. Begin! Act 3. The Conquest of Coruscant. The first thing to do was jump the main fleet to Chandrila, and then move starfighters, ground troops, and other supporting units to Chandrila after we had enough power there to be able to safely mobilize there. A lesson learned early on was to not try to move fleets to systems which had enemy fleets in them without having my own fleet to protect the receiving units and ships. Unfortunately for the computer, it did not learn that lesson. As I discovered, Thrawn was on his way to a planet where my fleet was blockading. I delayed the planetary assault for an extra day to capture my prize, the Sherlock Holmes of the Chiss Ascendancy. It was a long campaign, but there weren't any significant experiences to note for the Coruscant campaign. I took each planet one at a time and moved all my troops out of the previous sector and proceeded to build as many Sullustan troops as possible. They're the cheapest and lowest maintenance cost ground unit for the rebels. And so, I would flood the newly conquered planets with Sullustans until my diplomats won over the planet's allegiance. Ironically, Luke and Leia had nothing to do with anything else for the rest of the game, as I left them and another Jedi prospect on permanent training missions on Chandrila. They never made any significant headway on their Jedi training, but eventually I'm sure they would have ended up ranking up. But it took way too long and I had bigger fish to fry than worry about Jedi progress. That said, Luke and Leia weren't there for the fateful day the rebels took Coruscant and captured the Emperor, thus sealing the final death throes for the Empire. The last objective was to capture Darth Vader. But where was he? I decided it would be easier to defend the rebel base and also defend Coruscant if I moved the rebel base to Coruscant along with Mon Mothma and the fleet I'd left defending the home team. This would let me safely split up the fleet again to try to find where Vader was and retake any remaining Imperial worlds. Remember that while I was waging my war in the inner core world systems, the Empire had sent a fleet to bully one of my outer rim systems? Well, the time had come to retake that system. And it's like the roles had been reversed now, with the Empire doing hit-and-run tactics, while I tried to spread a net to capture the assailing fleet. The final capture was unremarkable, though. I steadily retook each planet. I wouldn't say it was a quick job, but it was faster than any of the battles for the core worlds. The rebels clearly had the upper hand now, having destroyed most of the Empire's ships. At one point I saw Vader on one of the planets and I thought, "At last, I'm done!" But after a planetary assault, he, yet again, slipped away. Guy's more slippery than a bar of soap. So I thought, well, if there are no more Imperial worlds, there won't be anywhere else for Vader to go. So I finished taking back each planet. And right at that point, a small fleet appeared in the next Outer Rim system over and brutalized my mine and refinery planets. I get that the Empire had nothing left to lose, but this just felt mean and felt personal. So I jumped my fleets over to the next system, and the Empire continued to decimate my poor resource planets. I popped one of my fleets above one of my actual bases in that sector. The other fleet just moved to the nearest planet. And that's when the game came to an end. The Empire had jumped to the same planet as one of my fleets, gunned down the mines and refineries, and didn't leave before my fleet arrived and ended the nuisance. Permanently. Considering the journey we've been on with my retelling of the fight, it felt like there would be some kind of crazy fanfare, but it was just a short clip and an end crawl. But what a fight. Let me give you some numbers. Remember, this was on easy difficulty. I played Star Wars Rebellion for 45 hours in total. Mind you, that's counting both the tutorials and the actual Rebel campaign. The in-game day counter was over 2,000 days. And real-life time was spread over the course of a month and a half of chipping away at the campaign. Feels like I'm supposed to wrap up the review here. We've gone on long enough for a full video, that's for sure. But that was just the story part of the game. If you play the game, you'll likely have a different experience than I had, and because the game is so open-ended in what can be accomplished and the order that it can be done in. Anyway, getting back to the review format, we're going back to talk about gameplay mechanics. Let's quickly explain the win condition for Star Wars Rebellion. As the Rebels, you want to take control of Coruscant and also capture Palpatine and Vader. As the Imperials, you need to find and destroy the mobile Rebels' secret base. It is randomly placed somewhere in the galaxy, by the way, while also capturing Luke Skywalker and Mon Mothma. The next thing to remember is Star Wars Rebellion is real time. The only time the game is paused is when you have the pause screen popped up, or you're looking at the load save options menu. You can't pause and read notifications sent by your helper droids. If you're reading or taking too long to decide on something, you can know your enemy is already at work. There's so much going on while playing Star Wars Rebellion, it's daunting to try to simplify it enough for a review. It's real time, you'll move fleets from planet to planet, you'll move troops on and off fleets and between planets you control, you'll send characters across the galaxy on various missions to gather intelligence, improve diplomatic relations, and more. You'll need to manage mines and refineries to maximize resources. You want a 1-to-1 ratio, 1 mine for every refinery anywhere in the galaxy under your control. You'll also manage construction yards, building various facilities from shipyards to planetary defenses like shields and cannons. While doing all this, you'll also be trying to work your way towards your end goal objective, to win the game. It's really easy to get caught up in micromanaging all these different systems and riding the highs and lows. All that coming from someone who just struggled to play the game on the easiest difficulty. This is a game for people who love strategy games. The rest of these notes should be considered more like Atratzu's tips for how to survive Star Wars Rebellion. First one of a few things to note going into the game is there are tooltips which pop up as you hover over the buttons. Those help you learn what each button does and means. Don't overlook this small detail. XCOM UFO Defense didn't have this feature, which made it impossible to do anything without having a manual or a YouTube video up to tell you. You can also select the time speed between slow, medium, and fast. Take advantage of that. Slow the timer down to think and make decisions. After you're done, then increase the time speed so you don't have to wait. Had I said that to myself at the start of this journey, I would have scoffed at you.
I can't keep up when it's on slow speed. What do you mean I want to increase the time speed?
Well, I got better as I played, and eventually I did figure out my strategy. I also started using keyboard shortcuts after clicking buttons for the first 10 to 15 hours of gameplay. Alt 1 through 9 to switch what you're tracking on the galactic map. Alt and plus or minus to increase or decrease the game's speed. One of the hardest things I had to wrap my head around was how to win over and hold a planet's support. When you start out, you'll see a galaxy star map with a bunch of different colored and sized stars. Depending on what you're viewing, the larger the star, the more of that thing it has, be it sorted by popular support, idle personnel, idle fleets, fleets en route, idle shipyards, etc. It's important to note that you can control a planet and not have that planet's political or popular support. A planet's support is shown by the green, red, or green and red colored bar beneath it. Always remember in this game, green equals Imperial, red equals Rebels. So if you see a planet which is green but has a full red bar under it, it supports the Rebels but is under Imperial control. If the Imperial garrison troops left, they would switch back to the Rebels. One of the last stumbling points for me was sending special characters on missions and trying to build stuff on one planet and send it to another planet. I could figure out some of the rest of the stuff on my own, but I really needed to read the manual and follow the tutorial for it. You'll need to select a target. So oftentimes you'll need to have multiple windows up, one for the system your unit is in, the other window with your target. When assigning a mission, your cursor will change to crosshairs, and you'll click on your target, be that target a ship, planet, building, ground troop, Darth Vader, etc. If you assign incorrectly, like trying to make Bothan sabotage something, C-3PO will exclaim, "What are you doing? That unit can't accomplish the assigned task, stupid fleshy meatbag!" Say hypothetically you want to build a construction yard on Tatooine, which is completely uninhabited. They don't have any buildings at all. And Ryloth just so happens to have a construction yard. Perfect. Bring up Ryloth's construction window. Make sure you can still see all the planets in the other system window for the Oris sector. Right-click on Ryloth's construction window, select Target, and click on Tatooine to set it as the target for the building. Then you can select the building that you want. A final detail to note is there's a deployment time to send a building from one planet to another. If you send a building to Tatooine from Ryloth, Ryloth is pretty nearby to Tatooine. But if you were going to send it from Ryloth to, say, Hoth, way on the other side of the galaxy, it'll still get there, but not for a long time. A lot of the rest of the game will just come in time as you get used to the user interface and rules. I suggest checking out the game's manual and following along with the tutorials to get a grasp on how to play. I love it when I start a subsection with the statement, "I'm not going to talk about it." I'm not going to talk about tactical gameplay. Generally speaking, strategy is wide, sweeping plans and on a larger scale, while tactical is smaller and related to battles. These terms are also used in the same way in Star Wars Rebellion. We've only really talked about strategic gameplay so far. There's a whole other part of the game where you can watch Imperial and Rebel fleets attack each other. When a Rebel fleet meets an Imperial fleet, much like Pokemon trainers, they battle. You can go through the whole game with the autocomplete button, or you can man the battle station and give commands yourself. I'm not going to talk about tactical gameplay because, simply put, I didn't do it. The graphics were broken and I didn't feel like doing resource and installing other software to fix the game. At some point I may come back and tinker around with it, but not today. Installing fixes to make X-Wing Alliance look beautiful would come first. It is cool that you can command the fleet's tactics and set the battle plan, but it's also good you don't need to if you don't want to. I'd probably win more battles if I'd learned more about the tactical gameplay, but it's really hard on the eyes to watch pink squares fly around at each other. Did you know that when Star Wars Rebellion first came out, it received mixed reviews, and some people downright hated it? Since then, it's definitely risen to be much more popular due to more of a cult following. I can understand some people not being interested in Star Wars Rebellion, especially today with how much work I had to do to figure out how to play this game. I messaged my brother with a screenshot of reading the manual and said,
I'd better get a diploma for all the work I'm doing to learn this game.
I'll expect my certificate of accomplishment in the mail, in the comments, or in the Steam Awards this review hopefully earns. If anyone even reads it. Star Wars Rebellion was great. I've never played anything like it, and I was floored by the expanded universe characters who made appearances. But once again, I think this game is perfect for the Venn diagram of people who like strategy games intersecting with the circle for people who like Star Wars. If you are between those two, I strongly suggest giving this game a try. If not, the reception could really be hit or miss. Thank you for watching. My name is Atratzu, and I will see you in the next review. Make sure you subscribe and follow, and subscribe and follow, and subscribe and follow. And don't forget to subscribe and follow. Like the video, subscribe, follow, subscribe and follow, like the video. Check out my social medias. I've got a Blue Sky. I've got a Twitter. I've got an Instagram. I've got a MySpace. I don't actually have a MySpace. Don't try to look that up. Subscribe and follow. Subscribe. You know, do all the things. Keep doing it. Why do you need to hear me tell you this? Because I need to keep saying it. Because there's one person out there that probably didn't subscribe. You know they didn't. Please subscribe. Do the thing. I'm begging you. I'm on my knees. I'm begging you, please. Baby, subscribe. You must subscribe and follow. Follow and subscribe. Like the video.